They painted his name into the smoke before the ashes had even cooled. Nero, the artist king who sang while Rome burned. I remember the first time I heard it, a hiss of a rumor that moved faster than any chariot, that the emperor had watched the city swallow itself and, like some cruel god, smiled. Listen, not for the chorus you've been fed by senators and poets, but for the small, searing truth at the center of the blaze. The night the fire began, the city smelled of oil and figs and something older, the mildew of secrets. It started near the Circus Maximus, a ribbon of flame licking up from a stack of timber and dye, and within an hour the sky had become a lie, a sheet of molten copper, and the stars hid as if in shame. People ran like animals, their faces turned to the light that had eaten their roofs. I watched from an alley so narrow a coin could have bridged it, and I felt something else besides fear, a deliberate hush, a calculation folded tight beneath the panic. Nero? He was a man who loved to be seen, on stages, in marble, in bronze. He craved spectacle as certain men crave breath. The story that endured fit him too neatly. The liar cat, the mad pyromaniac emperor, a single grotesque image that made sense to the frightened and the vengeful. It is easier to point at one head than to name the many hands that move a city. You must understand the politics. Rome was a tight, coiling rope where honor and humiliation tugged each other like feral dogs. The Senate whispered like a nest of vipers. Factions crept and struck. Nero's new plans, broad boulevards, palaces that would eat the old neighborhoods, a domus that would glitter like a wound, set men with ledgers and blood on a collision course. Houses slated for erasure sat beside towers of influence. To rebuild one's dream, one had to turn away from someone else's profit. So when the first roofs collapsed and the temples began to catch, the accusations seated themselves. Who stood to gain from ash? Who would profit from cleared lots and new contracts? Fingers pointed, always to the emperor. It suited them. Better a single tyrant be damned than a roomful of senators lose their fortunes. We were a people expert in stories. We preferred a villain we could mock to the slow, knobby work of naming complicity. And yet, as the smoke turned the dawn the color of old copper, I saw other shapes in the light. Shadowed men moving like rats through the ruins, tossing barrels that hissed and spat, opening sealed sacks and emptying them into homes already thirsty for flame. I saw them go from alley to alley with a purpose so cold it made my scalp prickle. They were not soldiers. They wore the plain cloaks of laborers, the kind of garments senators used when they wanted nobody to remember their faces. They worked with cinder and oil as if rehearsed, and where they passed, embers found new wood, and where embers found new wood, a rumor found its way to the market. The emperor, the musician, the arsonist. For days, the city pitched between grief and accusation. Nero walked through the smoked streets with his face set like flint. Some said he wept. Others called it theater. He opened his roofless halls to the homeless and housed them in tents, a mend of charity that looked to the eye like a final apology, and to the ledger like a plan to remold the city in his own image. The Senate fed on the spectacle. Priests read omens into the ash. The Christians, always easy and forever lonely, were plucked from alleys and made to serve as scapegoats. The story grew in the telling until the truth, whatever it had been, became small and brittle as a bone dropped into the water. I kept my mouth closed then. I was young, and my oath was to ink and recall, not to rebellions that smelled of smoke. But ink is patient. It remembers what men wish to forget. I wrote the names of the fallen, the listings of lands to be cleared, the contracts that appeared, the hands that signed them after the fires, and those pages burned with the rest of my life. Or so I thought. Now, years later, with my hair like frost and my throat gravel, I am driven by a thing that is ugly and necessary: confession. I have not told this story because confession will not unburn anything. But perhaps the truth is the last city we can save. The twist you expect is that Nero struck the match. You expect a tyrant, solitary and monstrous, chuckling as Rome folded. You expect the emperor with lyre in hand. But here is the truth. The ember of it I have carried for decades. The fires were not lit for poetry. They were lit for policy.